Hi guys, Janus here. Hope your day is going well. In this video, I'm going to go over some pretty big dietary changes I had to make to improve my vascular health, along with various types of food I found that were very beneficial to blood vessel growth. Additionally, I'm going to address some food that I found hindered growth. Lastly, I'll be talking about supplements towards the end. The first area I would like to address is a slowly growing list of foods I've deemed the Unforgivables. I started developing this list about a decade ago as I noticed how certain foods would leave me feeling terrible after eating them, and then others, which, while considered as generally healthy options, were absolute nightmares for me and my goals. For many, this list will be a review. For others, this might be a wake-up call that you need to start turning your life around. Before I continue, I'd like to share a bit of my personal philosophy. In my time spent studying various types of athletes and groups of people throughout the world, I came to understand the term healthy from a much less ambiguous perspective than my peers. I came to understand that the truest definition of healthy is whether or not something brings us closer to a given goal. Every food is like a drug, with benefits and side effects. Moving forward, I would like everyone to keep this in mind. Alright. Here we go. I'm someone who always believed in giving bad news first, so in this portion of the video, I'll be revealing all the things which I found brought my blood vessel growth gains to a grinding halt. Number 1, salt. Unlike a lot of food that appears on this list, salt directly impairs endothelial cell-based nitric oxide production, a process which is absolutely crucial for healthy blood vessel growth. While it should be mentioned that sodium is needed by the body, too much is a proven health risk. According to the American Heart Association, somewhere between 1,500 milligrams is the ideal limit. For me, personally, I found that anything approaching even a third of that amount in a day caused a sharp decline in healthy blood vessel growth. Being someone who is already sensitive to sodium as is, cutting back was a double win. In my efforts to avoid high levels of salt, I primarily stuck with homemade meals and avoided just about anything in a box like the plague. For this very same reason, I completely swore off going out to eat. Every time I broke this habit and ate a salty meal, my gains would immediately stop and then take a few days to get back on track. In short, consider salt public enemy number 1, but just remember your body needs sodium to function, so don't try to cut it out entirely. Number 2, processed sugar. This one hurt a lot. While I'm not an avid candy eater, I found most food choices come with added sugars to make them taste better. Sugar is not as powerful as salt in its nitric oxide production impairment, but it has been shown to cause a lasting depression in its production. While this can be measured in hours, it's due to chronic consumption that this one can be pretty dangerous. Number 3. Processed oils. While the extraction process for oil is relatively safe outside of a few controversial chemicals, the real danger comes while they sit on the shelf. Oil is something that becomes easily oxidized and destabilized when exposed to light. Many companies have taken steps to reduce these problems, but on the whole, the bottling is clear and therefore is suspect of suspicion. More importantly, make special note I didn't specify any particular kind of oil. Oil is something that's meant to be protected and stabilized by the foods they inhabit. Removal almost immediately starts causing problems. Whenever an oil is locally sourced, and therefore not sitting on a shelf for months at a time, extracted oils can be amazing for a person's overall health. Outside of that, they can be a source of serious endothelial cell damage in the form of oxidized fatty acids and dangerous metabolites. In addition to this one, cooking with oils is exceptionally worse. Very few oils can withstand cooking temperatures unscathed. In my research, I found that heat-damaged oil can be so dangerous to endothelial cells that in some cases they can cause death on contact. Even if death does not occur, nitric oxide levels can remain blunted for days after exposure. In this case of repeated exposure, my research points to aggressive instances of vascular inflammation that often expresses itself as mottled red and white skin coupled with the beginning stages of fibrosis. For this reason, deep-fried foods, I have all too personally found, can cause this reaction at a frightening rate. Number 4, artificial sweeteners. Before continuing, I'd like to say that while there are serious health concerns with artificial sweeteners in a few cases, the real danger comes in the form of receptor activation. Researchers have discovered that in some cases, artificial sweeteners can bind to our taste receptors so powerfully as to damage them. A side effect of this powerful binding is an unintended feedback loop activation, which causes insulin release when inappropriate. Initially, this is not an issue. With repeated exposure, however, insulin resistance can quickly become a problem in certain cases. This was a pretty big blow for me, since I would often use artificial sweeteners to spice up bland dishes. Considering how important artificial sweeteners were to my food intake, I initially ignored these findings. After a few weeks, however, I noticed that I would get more winded even when doing normal exercising. I'd occasionally get splitting headaches, and I began experiencing odd muscular pains. Even though it was seriously hard, I eventually walked away from these chemical marvels. Looking back, I'm really glad I did, because this year scientists have begun releasing papers showing how they can directly contribute to obesity and other health-related issues. Number 5, and this one was really surprising. Superfoods, aka anti-cancer foods. These type of foods have almost always been found to either directly hinder capillary bed formation or blood vessel remodulation pathways. While this sounds great, not everybody has cancer or out of control blood vessel growth. In fact, I'd say the average person has the exact opposite problem. For everyone's benefit, I'd like to list what I call the Unforgivables. The only way to make it onto this list is by directly lowering either blood vessel growth factors or by potently interfering with microtubule formation. Please keep in mind, this is in no way an exhaustive list. Green tea, black tea, oolong tea, black pepper, garlic, ginger, oregano, basil, peppermint, sesame seeds, nearly all mushrooms, apples, pineapples, all nightshades, cumin, turmeric, flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. The easiest and quickest way to find these sneaky sources of blunted blood vessel growth is to keep a food journal. If not for my own personal food journaling habits, I wouldn't have caught quite a few on this list. As an ending note, if any food gets touted as anti-cancer, it should be immediately researched. Sometimes a food can be anti-cancer in that it protects against DNA damage and not actually due to blunting blood vessel formation. Genetic protectors can be a great source of blood vessel revitalization, but do beware of those that interfere with blood vessel growth. Number 6. Animal-based products. Whether it's the cholesterol, leftover hormones, antibiotic-resistant superbacteria, heat shock proteins, naturally occurring biotoxins like lectins, which are a lot more potent than the versions that appear in plants, or the chemicals they bathe meat in to literally keep them from rotting and falling apart in the packages, I personally cannot condone eating animal-based products in almost any capacity. It would be one thing if we lived in a world where we could go down to the docks and get a shipment of fresh fish, we slaughtered our own meals, or we got dairy products from the farmer down the street. But for most of us, we simply can't do that. More on that later. Number 7. Omega-3s. Cancer doctors might be shouting in the streets about how great they are, but for me, they were an infuriating source of stallouts in terms of blood vessel development. Anytime I introduced foods that had these into my diet, I would watch my progress come to a grinding halt. Every time, and I tried quite a few times. Worse still, my blood would usually thin to the point that I would end up on the floor and the world would just start spinning. Not a pleasant occurrence, to say the least. On top of all of that, my skin would almost immediately dry out upon eating omega-3. On the whole, I learned to considerably limit my intake. Number 8. Eating out at restaurants. The average chain restaurant cares an awful lot more about their bottom line than your health. A lot of times, this means they put chemicals and elements in their food which usually only get revealed in court. Basically, save yourself some money and cook at home. Number 9. Soy. Soy anything can be a great source of nutrients and protein, but they have an extremely powerful effect on blood vessel formation that can leave you spinning your wheels. Soy, I quickly learned, is quite insidious. In today's world, it's extremely hard to find anything that does not contain soy. Even fruits are coated in soy-based waxes to make them last longer, so while avoiding this dietary element will be all but impossible, I personally benefited from making sure I didn't directly consume soy products. Now, it's time for the good news. In this next list, I'd like to reveal food sources I personally found to be absolute boons for blood vessel growth. Just like the first part, this list is not exhaustive, and using a food journal is crucial to tracking how your body responds to new dietary elements. Let's get to it. Number 1, and this one should be no surprise to anybody, arginine-rich foods. More than just supplementing with arginine, I found that foods high in arginine usually contained complementary elements which really helped take my gains to the next level. The fastest way to find arginine-rich food is to use nutrient search tools typically found on dieting and food database websites. Number 2, PGE1 Precursors. PGE1 is one of the main chemicals responsible for controlling collagen deposition throughout the body. Keeping PGE1 levels high helps your capillary beds expand quickly. The best way to supercharge PGE1 concentration levels is to keep an eye on omega-6 levels in your diet. While I was making my gains, I was consistently eating over 60 grams daily. My personal choice for getting this important dietary factor in was peanuts. 1 for its calories, 2 nutrient content, and 3 availability. In addition to PGE1 formation, omega-6 fatty acids have been shown to directly upregulate VEGF along with other endothelial cell targeting growth factors. Number 3, fiber-rich foods. Anytime the amount of soluble fibers in my diet dropped off, my blood vessels could feel it. While fiber does not directly contribute to blood vessel growth, it does keep your body from getting overwhelmed with nutrients and sending our metabolism out of kilter. Additionally, if you're someone that's not quite ready to cut meat out of your diet, research shows that fiber-rich foods reduce cholesterol absorption when consuming animal-based products. Number 4, leafy greens. The largest contributors these have are nitrates, reduced estrogen load, and antioxidant content. Blood vessel growth should be thought of exactly like skeletal muscle growth on a hormonal level. Optimal levels are key to faster gains. Beyond this, blood vessels need antioxidants to use plaque formation properly. Yes, you heard that right. Contrary to popular belief, plaque formation, or rather cholesterol patches, are not some life-ending occurrence. It's like a scab on your skin. Once the wound heals and your cells begin to repopulate, your body naturally begins breaking down the patch job and recycles the materials. Plaque forms and disappears all the time, just like scabs. Outside of genetic abnormalities, research shows that plant-based diets have the power to reverse many of the common killers in the West, like heart disease, hardened arteries, and atherosclerosis. Number 5, fruits. On the one hand, fruits do possess elements that inhibit blood vessel growth in one respect, but then cause greater gene expression elsewhere. I personally have found very few which I believe to be dangerous for blood vessel formation, these being pineapples and, in one instance, limes. All of that said, fruits do contain a lot of sugars. Keeping that in mind, these are best eaten with a fiber-rich food to keep absorption levels steady. Number 6, nuts and seeds. Outside of the amazing amount of calories that can be found in this food group, they also possess a secret weapon that's second to none in the fight against erectile dysfunction. This weapon is so powerful that hospitals and clinics use it for heavy metal chelation therapy. For most, this substance gets a really bad rap. For blood vessels, though, it's like the fountain of youth. This chemical goes by many names: hexametaphosphate, IP6, inositol, and lastly, phytic acid. In my research, I found that many vascular diseases cause disbalances in mineral metabolism, and this all too often results in blood vessel calcification. Whenever plant-based meals are consumed regularly, phytic acid levels in the blood begin to elevate and begin actively pulling mineral deposits from soft tissues. The absolute biggest lesson I've learned about the body is that it naturally possesses an impressive ability to grow blood vessels. For most, we just have to make sure we don't eat things that get in its way. Plant-based lifestyles, outside of the unforgivables I've mentioned in the first half, allow our bodies to rise to the challenges we place before them unhindered. Even though this sounds simple, the outcomes are anything but humble. I first got tipped off to the wonders of a plant-based lifestyle studying people who live to be over 100. In the world, there are hotspots called blue zones, where researchers have found an inordinate amount of people who live to be over 100 years old regularly. In literally every case, these blue zones consumed an entirely plant-based diet. That said, living over 100 is nice and all, but what did it mean for blood vessel growth? Something that baffled researchers is that even the exceedingly older members of these populations had blood vessels that were still amazingly robust and pliable. Things like atherosclerosis, heart disease, and metabolic disorders were basically non-existent. This told me right away that a plant-based diet could keep blood vessels functioning optimally. But could it do more? The research already pointed to an increase in blood vessel functionality and health, but I was genuinely curious what kind of changes this could have in other areas of the body. Before I even came up with the Angion method, the very first breakthrough in research I ever had came in the form of calluses. My whole life, my feet were like living shoes due to how thick and tough the calluses were on the soles of my feet. It never seemed to matter how much of the calluses I scraped off in the shower or nervously picked at. It never seemed to lessen any. Within the first few months of officially switching over to a completely plant-based diet, however, I began noticing the soles of my feet getting softer. A little under a year later, my calloused feet had become smooth and supple. More than just softer feet, on the whole, I noticed a healthy red glow had returned to my skin. Even more exciting, I began noticing an increase in mental clarity, along with a gradual rise in resting endurance levels. Before I switched over to a plant-based diet, I remember feeling literal dread as I approached staircases. It never failed that after I'd get to the top, I'd be pouring sweat. After a year of eating a plant-based diet, however, cardio actually became fun. Running full tilt up hills didn't even slow me down anymore, let alone a little staircase. While a plant-based lifestyle can't turn back the clock, it can give you back quality of life. If a plant-based diet is something that you're interested in, I would highly encourage you to do additional research to see if it's something for you. In this last portion, I'd like to go over supplements that I found were hugely helpful for improving my vascular health, along with promising changes in how they're being used. For many, it should be no surprise that arginine makes it on this list. Arginine, as many know, is converted almost directly to nitric oxide by endothelial cells. Currently, I'm in the process of researching a novel means of administration. In my studies, I came to learn that arginine can be injected straight into the bloodstream. I was very first tipped off about this bizarre form of arginine use studying horses. In attempts to quickly increase endurance and recovery time in racehorses, animal trainers began experimenting with amino acid-based injections. Arginine very quickly stood out from the pack. Not only did the injections have a profound effect on endurance, long-standing high-flow priapisms were a common side effect. It's for this reason that whenever these methods are used, trainers make sure to taper off the injections before races. The second supplement I found to be an absolutely enormous boon for blood vessel growth is magnesium chloride. I originally found out about this nifty molecule studying emergency medical treatment procedures for heart attacks. Based on the research, I found that magnesium chloride saline drips were powerful enough to either stop a heart attack or produce a significant increase in the amount of tissue that survives the heart attack. After I read about its effectiveness, I wondered how my body would react to long-term oral supplementation. The very first thing I did was buy magnesium chloride flakes. Magnesium chloride dissolves almost effortlessly in water, so when it came in the mail, I quickly prepared a medium concentration solution and then proceeded to drink it. Not knowing how my body would react, I made sure to only use a few flakes. Even though the amount I used to prepare the solution was relatively tiny, the effect was very pronounced. Within 30 minutes, my muscles became noticeably relaxed, and I began feeling a pleasant warmth in my skin. Needless to say, I now drink some magnesium before bed every night. That said, magnesium chloride does not taste good. Unless you can stand its overpowering flavor, I would look into encapsulated versions. Okay guys, I hope I've given everyone a lot of food for thought. In my next video, I'll be explaining once and for all which forms of cardio are the end-all be-all for blood vessel growth. Expect that video 2 weeks from now. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see everyone next time.